A Conservative peer, Lord Frost, who has been critical of the influence of the Office for Budget Responsibility, saying the Treasury under Jeremy Hunt has allowed the OBR to usurp its role. He's also been accused of being part of a secret plot to bring down Rishi Sunak after he was part publicising a £40,000 YouGov poll which predicted disaster for the Conservatives at the next election. Great to have you here on the eve of the budget. I'm very interested to hear your analysis of where we are. So what do you want to see from the Chancellor tomorrow?
Well, what I want to see is a budget that deals with the problems the country has got. And it does have lots and lots of problems, there's no doubt about that. But what I'd like to hear is the Chancellor setting out a strategy, telling us that there's no future for this country as a high-tax, high-spend, social democrat economy, coming up with a strategy that's going to focus on growth. The economy is not growing, incomes per head are actually falling and people can feel it. We need something that deals with that, and I'm afraid, welcome as a 2p cut in national insurance would be, it is really just sort of fiddling while Rome burns, I'm afraid.
I mean, the Chancellor would say that's an expensive policy, it's a big policy, 2 percentage points of national insurance.
It helps. I'm always happy when the government stops taking money from people and allows them to keep it themselves. But it is only 0.5% of GDP. What we've got to do is set out a strategy. We've got to deal with the problems the country's got. We've got to try and get down energy prices, for example, deal with the net zero problem, deal with the productivity-destroying public services that we've got.
Deal
All
with
of
the
those
net
are
zero
the big
problem.
problems.
What does that mean?
So we've got a net zero policy that I believe is pushing up costs of energy prices. Energy is about 4 times as expensive here as it is in the US. If you want to see why our economy is not growing, that's one big reason for that. We've got to look at the strategy. It's no good just coming up with something to try and satisfy people on the day. We've got to show what is a Conservative strategy, how will Conservative Britain be different from Labour Britain, how are we going to get there?
You tweeted this week to say this: when will Conservatives start believing that the polls say what they say and that the party is heading for a massive defeat unless there is some radical change soon? I mean, you talk about a strategy, you talk about growth, but what's an example of the radical change that you think is necessary?
Well, we need to get tax down, we need to get spending down. That is the biggest problem. The government's spending best part of £1 trillion every year, and good chunks of it are wasted. We need to do that. We need to deal with net zero. We need to deal with the NHS, which is wasting huge amounts of money. We need to get immigration down. We need to build more houses. There's no end to the problems.
A lot of people disagree with you, though, on the tax and spend. If you look at YouGov, for example, they recently asked people what they thought the government should prioritise. 57% said funding public services and only 27% said tax cuts. So there'll be people shouting at the TV saying, you're the guy who, went for Brexit, now you're saying we should have tax cuts, look at the state of public services. You're wrong.
So people are right to identify that public services are not well funded. Undoubtedly, that is true. But the problem is growth. We're not able to fund them because the economy is not growing. And we're not going to solve that problem by pushing up spending even further. We've got to get to grips with the fact that the country is living beyond its means in an economy that is not growing. And unless we take some difficult decisions to change that, we're just going to continue on the same path. Things are going to get worse and worse.
Pollsters also do these kind of word clouds around politicians where they ask members of the public, what comes into your mind when I say this person's name? And I just wonder if I could do it with you. What word comes into your mind when I say Rishi Sunak to you?
Gosh, Prime Minister.
Oh, come on. Give us another one. An adjective.
Conventional. What we've seen is conventional economic policy over the last 18 months. And we've seen, as a result, the economy is not growing and Conservative poll ratings falling. And we've got to change that.
Now, I've got to ask you about the plot. OK? I've got to ask you about the plot.
The non-existent plot.
OK, well, this is your chance to explain what's going on, because you helped to organise it. I think you're right, I'm right in saying it, a £40,000 YouGov poll, which forecast a Labour landslide. The group behind the poll is known as the Conservative Britain Alliance. It's a big, expensive poll. You then kind of framed it in a particular way in The Telegraph, a Conservative supporting paper. What was the purpose of the poll?
The purpose of the poll was to try and bring home to Conservatives, voters, MPs, everybody, that the polls said what they said, that we were heading for a very, very bad election result and a lot of Conservative MPs were going to lose their seats. And although this particular poll has attracted a lot of attention, obviously, nevertheless, it isn't saying anything different from any other poll. In fact, it's more favourable to the Conservative Party than quite a few that have come since then. We've had 3 polls putting us at 20%. And I think it would be good if the leadership would worry less about the circumstances of the polls and a bit more about what they were saying, which is that we're heading for a very serious defeat.
Who paid for it then?
People are allowed to fund polls without having their names been made public. It's a free country, and I intend to respect that. The important thing is that the message of the poll says what it says.
I mean, Number 10 weren't very happy with you, were they? Did they have some crosswords? Some people were threatening to chuck you out of the party.
There's been, I don't think so, but there's been the odd sort of crossword, undoubtedly, and I think that's a pity because what I want to do, and I think we all want to do, everybody who is involved in politics on the Conservative side wants to do, is get us to win an election, and the way of doing that is to deliver Conservative policies. You said earlier that this was a party focusing on its core vote. Well, I wish. We're well below our core vote now. Most of our core vote won't come out and vote for us, and that's the problem.
Do you think that Rishi Sunak is the man to lead the Conservatives into the next election?
Well, I don't want to get into that, actually. I've never called for Rishi Sunak to be replaced as leader. I didn't in that article that you referred to. I'm worried about the policies. I still believe it is possible to get the right policies in place and change the polling and put us on a better path. But we've got to do it very soon, I hope tomorrow.
And if you could wave your wand and have one policy in tomorrow's budget, which one would it be?
Something on net zero. I really think we've got to deal with that seriously, get energy prices down, get manufacturing and industry back in this country and start rebuilding the economy.